Well, now I know what Doc Brown felt like when he spent his entire life savings fixing up his DeLorean to go Back to the Future. But unlike Doc Brown's Back to the Future DeLorean, when I got this thing up to 88 miles an hour, nothing happened, which is great. This thing is running fantastically. And for the first time, I'm going to total up all the costs of fixing up the cheapest DeLorean in the USA. It was a lot of money. It was a lot. And for all those that follow Hoovies Garage regularly, if not, please subscribe. You'll know that I don't win. This doesn't happen very often. And it's weird because I did not intend on buying a DeLorean when I was up at a classic car auction back in December. I had no intention of buying it. And when I saw this car and saw it was an automatic, I really didn't want to buy it. But then it came across the auction block and I had missed out on one car and saw this one. The second look, it looked really nice, and cosmetically this car is very nice. And because I have zero impulse control at all, I bought the car. Now, on the third look, things didn't look very good because the transmission was slipping very badly and it had some serious fuel issues. But at only $14,000, that was the hammer price for this car, I couldn't complain much. It was really, really cheap. It was cheaper than any other running and driving DeLorean listed in the United States at the time. Now, the old transmission, it came back to life miraculously with some new fluid and a filter, but it was still very much dead. There were bits inside the pan and it was still slipping and really slow to get into gear, so it needed to be replaced. Additionally, the fuel system issues were really bad, but I could still drive this car for the first time, and oh man, was it bad. It would stall under any kind of load because of the fuel issues. It was missing its mirrors, the doors wouldn't stay up, the tires from sitting for so long, they felt like squares, and the brakes, that was really scary. I hit the brakes and almost nothing happened. And the exhaust, of course, looked so rusty, like it had been recovered from the Titanic and then slapped on my DeLorean, which is weird because the rest of the car is in good shape. So with all that, it looked like I was in for an old George McFly left hook knockout punch. And when I started shopping for a transmission, things looked even worse. The only one I could find was $5,000, a new old stock replacement. I couldn't find a rebuild kit, so I asked for your help on the internet, and some stranger on the internet actually found the rebuild kit. It was shared with an RV in Europe, kind of weird, and a few other cars. But another stranger from the internet offered his used DeLorean transmission to me for only $1,000. He was swapping his for a manual transmission and didn't want to keep his automatic, which I obviously jumped on. That was a great deal for a whole transmission. And even more good news came from my mechanic, the car wizard, who discovered the fuel pump was the source of all of my fuel issues and my stalling. It was actually not the right fuel pump for the car. It was rigged in there incorrectly with a bad pickup hose. Anyway, all I needed was a new fuel pump kit to make everything right. A complete fuel pump kit for this car was $530, and it cost me $280 for the car wizard to go in and install it all. The used transmission cost $1,000, and I spent another $700 in labor to install. He also did the rear main seal since the transmission was out and it was leaking oil. With another $300 spent on brake lines and some fresh fluid, I had a driving DeLorean again, which added up with the purchase price, the auction fees, transportation. I was a little over $18,000 into the car, which is still way under the money for one of these things. So I was feeling pretty good, but there was a long way to go on this thing. Now, about a month ago on my first real drive, the first one where I didn't feel like I was going to die, there were still a lot of problems. The brakes, even though I had new lines all around and a fresh bleed, they still didn't feel right. When I would brake hard, it would pull really hard to the right. The calipers, they were still sticking, so they needed to be replaced. Also, when I went over bumps, the steering column would rattle, and there was a mount right on the firewall that had come apart and allowed the steering column to jiggle and rattle and make a pretty annoying noise. But that was by far not the most annoying noise. That went to the exhaust that sounded like a really badly running lawnmower when this thing was at wide open throttle. And when I was done with my test drive, sometimes I couldn't even get out of this car because the door latch would get all sticky and the struts were so weak, so the door would actually jam and there's no way to get out. It's kind of claustrophobic because these window openings are so small. Even if I did shrink myself down to like an action figure size, imagine a Hoovies Garage action figure, that's actually a good idea, I couldn't have got out because this window regulator didn't work. And the other side was having problems as well. A lot of issues. The headliner was also falling down and sagging in my hair. Visibility wasn't very good in this car even when it was new and had no problems, but it was made much worse by the mirror glass completely missing on this car. And the cherry on top had to be the ancient out of round tires that were just miserable to drive at any speed. So I had to spend a lot of money, a lot. So I had to go much deeper into my wallet to sort this weird machine out. With parts and labor, I spent another $5,690 to fix this thing. A lot of money, a lot. And a big chunk of that was the exhaust. It was $1,300 for this exhaust system with bigger, beefier headers, along with a nice free-flowing exhaust system. It actually sounds pretty good considering it's coming from an engine with only, whatever, 120 horsepower. So when you total up my purchase price with my first round of repairs, then my second round of repairs, my total invested into this DeLorean is just under $24,000. That's a lot considering where I started, but when you look at cars for sale on autotrader.com, which link below is my column on AutoTrader, you can see I got a pretty good deal. The cheapest one on there is $36,000. And if you look elsewhere on the internet, some higher mileage ones that are pretty sorted like this are in the high 20s to low 30s. So I'm sitting pretty good right now on this DeLorean. This is a very rare win for me. And speaking of justifying ways to spend way too much money, let's stop by the new garage. There's actually been a lot of progress. There's walls. I know I confused a lot of you in my last video with the staircase that was crumbling. Looked like it was falling apart or got attacked by Godzilla or something, but it's actually intentional. It's all been jackhammered out. Because while the staircase was fun to do cans down, it was actually really dangerous. It gets up about 5.5 feet high with no railings and just a really narrow, steep staircase. We're going to put in a few landings here. So it'll be a couple steps and then a nice landing, probably some rails, build up the landscaping to where it's not a total death trap. But moving on to the garage, that's where the most progress is being made back here. Holy moly. They brought in some serious equipment here. Because, look at that. I have a garage. And I was actually here when the garage door went up. They hoisted it up with the Dyna lift. And as you can see, I'll be able to drive a car into here. That way, I'm not having to stack out of the two-car garage this way. This entire wall is going to come down. That's why they've taken off the siding. They've actually put a temporary wall inside the garage so they can rip this down. But here it is. Tomorrow, the roof goes on all the way, and then they could take down this bracing. They'll cut out the access here for the door, as well as a couple of windows. And now things are looking a lot bigger now that the walls are up. This is a good-sized garage. Still not enough to hold everything, but make a pretty good dent. Let's get back to the DeLorean. Like I said earlier, I'm $24,000 into this DeLorean now, which coincidentally is about what they cost new. Actually, when the company went bankrupt towards the end, they were selling them super cheap for like $14,000, whatever was left over. And current pricing levels are just really silly. Movie hysteria aside, these cars really don't have a lot going for them. They're obviously very underpowered. My exhaust video definitely proved that. And for being a rear engine-ish, mid-engine-ish car, it doesn't handle all that well either. Braking, not very good. And I have driven a manual one of these, and it's really not that much better. So what gives? Why all the DeLorean love? I mean, obviously, the stainless steel naked metal panels and the gull wing doors are really rad, but the negatives, there's a lot of negatives. Still, I love this thing. Honestly, I can't explain it, but I'm really starting to fall in love with this car the more that I drive it, even though it's not that comfortable of a cruiser either, which was a great characteristic of so many sporty cars in the 80s that really aren't that sporty. They were still comfortable. But still, there's just something about this car. I'm really digging it. And I don't really understand myself at the moment why I love this thing. Still, one thing's for sure though, I don't need a time machine to know that I'm going to be wasting a lot more money on this thing in the future. There's still some things to do. The air conditioning doesn't work because the condenser is leaking and the interior needs to be cleaned up a little bit. The back fiberglass rear hatch has a crack in it that needs fixed, but it's all small stuff, and this thing's gonna get all the love it deserves. Thank you for watching. I know I'm nuts. Do 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 do.